Welcome back to the Psalm 40 Project. I'm Jonah, and joining me today is Reverend Ruth Boven. How you doing today, Ruth?
I'm doing well, Jonah, thanks.
Good. So we've been talking to the ministers about their call story, how God's been moving in their life and kind of taking them through life. Softball, easy question for you. You're a pastor. What do you like about being a pastor?
What I like about being a pastor, well, a number of things, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is journeying with a people. Journeying with a people of faith, discerning sort of God's call to each of us and as a community. When I was in seminary, a lot of the women, and including me, we weren't sure whether we were going to be able to serve churches or not, whether there would be churches where we could go to.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a rough time.
Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge.
And it still is in a lot of regards.
It is. But I thought, hospital chaplaincy made sense to me too, if I weren't to get a call from a church.
Okay.
But I really wanted a call from a church because another thing about sort of journeying with a people is being there for their life events, from birth to death, from baptism, to burial, from baptism to profession of faith, weddings and, events that happen in the lives of the people that you're ministering among. It's wonderful and it's a privilege, and often in those special events or even, really difficult challenges, it's sometimes where I see God most clearly. Sometimes when you are visiting someone who is sick or someone who's dying, pastors will often talk about it as holy ground.
Okay.
And so it's actually something that, though it may seem difficult, and it is, and it may seem draining, and sometimes it is, there is also sort of a way that it nourishes your faith and brings you closer to God in these holy moments with the people that you've, been building relationships and living life with. So it's a huge privilege.
Yeah.
You
have slightly different role than everybody else that we've kind of talked to so far. Can you just flesh out real quick what that holy ground, holy moment kind of means to you, and just so people kind of get an idea of what that experience is like?
Yeah. Well, I'm the Minister of Congregational Care, so a lot of my focus is on caring for the congregation.
It's nice when it spells itself out.
Yeah, I know, right? So a lot of visiting, a lot of building relationships, a lot of just touching base, with people's in their life events, like I said, both positive and good and beautiful things, and difficult times, illness, and doing hospital visits. Probably every week, most every week, I am in the hospital, a couple times, visiting folks. Sometimes that's, Raybrooke or Beacon Hill or Samaritas, other places. And then, we have had a lot of funerals at LaGrave too, and so being involved with those is part of what I do a lot. The other thing at LaGrave is because it's so big, my time in terms of congregational care is sometimes also about organizing ways for people to be cared for, not directly from me, but in a group setting.
Yeah.
Well,
it's just no way for you to do it all.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
1,800 people here.
So widows, may get together to support each other, but I'm ensuring that those things are happening, or I'm trying to ensure that those things happen. Caregivers are getting together and supporting each other. Different groups of people on the cancer journey, training Stephen ministers so that they can be walking beside people in difficult times. So I think in my previous church, it was a little bit smaller. I felt like my care was often more direct, but in such a big church, I still do the direct care, but in addition to that, try to provide ways that people are cared for within this congregation in other ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know from talking to people that your work here is really appreciated, and that you do care for everyone here in this congregation.
Yeah,
so.
It's a good congregation to care for. It really is.
All right, so we talked a little bit about what you do. how did you get here? What are there a couple moments in life that you kind of can point out that you're like, that was where God was moving me? Yeah. You know, it doesn't necessarily need to be that at all, but just sort of this, can you give us just a little bit of your journey from wherever you want to start, whether that's birth or college seems to be a good spot for some people?
Well, I mean, I was a nurse. I worked as a nurse for 20 years. And toward the end of that 20 years, Greg and I, my husband and I, considered doing some work for what was then CRWRC. And so we considered doing relief work. And so we did that. Actually, it was more community development work. And we got sent to Mozambique. Our kids were small. We lived there for 2 years. I worked in nursing at that point, and so did some community health stuff. And Greg is a builder, and so he did some work on actually sort of developing some brick projects that helped some folks with a micro-enterprise thing. Okay. But anyway, while we were there, I sort of had this, not crisis of faith, but maybe struggle with faith. Sort of trying to understand in this very, very desperate situation. Mozambique, where we were, was sort of close to the bottom of the World Economic Index at the time. Okay. Desperately poor. And so growing up in a pretty comfortable home in Jenison, Michigan, you know, strong Christian family, all of a sudden I was living in a different context and had to sort of wrestle with God in this new context. And so it made me want to study my Bible more deeply and to do some theological studies. So we just committed that when we got back from Africa, I would go to RBC or Kuiper College. They were offering a great accelerated degree program at the time, so that's what I did. And then I just didn't want to be done. I didn't know that I wanted to be a pastor at that point, but I know I didn't want to be done studying. So then I just started taking courses at Calvin Theological Seminary. And in the process of that, and in the process of the church we were going to, inviting me to start doing some visiting of some folks, my calling started to take shape in a surprising way for both of us. I mean, I didn't go into the seminary thinking that I was going to come out with an MDiv and be called into ministry.